Broadcasting. This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer, joined by my co-host, Jack Hirsch, former 6-time president of the Boxing Writers Association of America. Jack, how are you doing tonight?
Good, Frank. The way you sound saying we're back, like we just came back from a commercial break. We've been away a week, Frank.
That's time flies when you're having fun. Okay.
We're back.
What should I say?
No, I mean, you make it seem like we just took a commercial break. We're back. We missed you all after a whole week. Just to emphasize it, a little showmanship here, Frank.
All right, Jack. Well, let's get the important things out of the way. The Philadelphia Eagles lost last Monday night. I didn't watch one play. I no longer have to worry about them breaking the coveted 1972 Miami Dolphins undefeated record. So I catch a little bit of a breather there. I'm worried about Ohio State winning the championship because I loathe them more than any other sporting entity in the history of the world, with the possible exception of Floyd Mayweather. So other than that, life was pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm thinking something I could annoy you with. I'm going to call Ohio State the Floyd Mayweather of college football. How about that?
The only difference, Jack, is they don't pick their opponents.
Well, yeah. Well, Floyd had a lot of tough opponents he fought, but that's another issue. This shouldn't be about him, but I know he recently fought Floyd, so that's on your mind because he recently fought. He was recently in the ring. How about that?
Did you happen to see that exhibition?
I saw the highlights. I wouldn't pay for that.
Jack, if people are going to pay for it, they can do it. I'm not going to pay for it. I never paid for a Mayweather fight my entire life. Whenever there was a pay-per-view fight, the ones I wanted to see, I went to a friend's house. I offered a couple bucks. They didn't take it, but I never hosted it.
Roy Jones paid Mayweather a big compliment the other day. He said he's the greatest fighter in the history of boxing for making money.
And I would agree with that.
For making money. Well, so
I would agree with that.
Money Mayweather. The name fits.
Jack, he is unparalleled in that regard. And speaking of fighters that we know of and care about and like and dislike, a guy passed away last night or sometime yesterday. Former junior middleweight champion Buster Drayton out of Philadelphia. Now, did you know Buster?
I didn't know him personally. No, I never met him.
Okay.
Good fighter. I mean, he came up in a good time. In boxing, there are various belt holders, but Buster Drayton did. He was good. Good, very good, solid fighter. Not a great fighter, but a very good one who deserved to hold the title. Definitely deserved it and earned it.
Tough as nails. Would travel to other countries and backyards to fight the best of the best. When I first started training at Joe Frazier's gym in 77, that's where I met him. And I was an amateur, and I was one of his main sparring partners for two of his first kind of marquee fights down the shore against Dwayne Thomas and Lyndall Holmes. He beat Dwayne Thomas. He lost to Lyndall Holmes, who was an outstanding fighter. But what I remember about Buster, Jack, and why it's kind of sad is there's a guy that was always smiling, always had a positive outlook on life, friendly, easygoing. I thought he would live to be 110, and he really was one of the good guys. And I know in this business you meet all kinds of people, but I've not seen anyone who had any negative thoughts about Buster Drayton. And I just thought that we should acknowledge his passing. He was 70 years old. I don't know what the cause of his death was. I don't know what kind of life he had outside of boxing afterwards. I do know he was a Marine, but he was one of the good guys, and he would fight anybody on any notice, and he would go anywhere to do it. And I was talking to a couple friends of mine about that this weekend because they didn't know who he was. And I was thinking later on, we're going to take a look back at Ali's 50th anniversary against Bob Foster. And that was obviously in 1972. And it got me thinking, Ali fought 6 times in 1972. Muhammad Ali. And these guys today, Jack, if they fight once a year, I just don't ever remember a period following boxing, being involved in it, where it was so hard to get elite guys in the ring.
Yeah, Frank, I would knock the guys in this era saying, oh, well, they don't fight enough. The guys in the past fought a lot. Yeah, in certain decades, certain fighters did. They fought an awful lot. You could point to a Harry Greb who had 45 fights in 1 year and won them all, okay?
That's the opposite end.
But then again, I could point to Jack Dempsey, who was a contemporary of Harry Greb, who went 3 years without defending his heavyweight title. I could point to the great Rocky Marciano, who'd be on a 2-fight-a-year schedule because his manager, Al Weil, felt that heavyweight title would be devalued if the champion defended it a lot. And maybe he had a point because Joe Louis would defend it routinely. 1 year, Joe Louis defended it something like 6 times or whatever, and it was called the Bum of the Month Club, okay? So the title was a little devalued, even though Louis was beating good fighters. This so-called Bum of the Month Club had some pretty good fighters.
But Jack, Marciano only fought for 7 years as a pro, 7 or 8 years, and he still had 50 fights. How long has Terrence Crawford been pro, and he's only had 36?
That's correct on the way up. But listen, I could point out to a Usyk and Lomachenko. Doesn't Usyk have less than 20 fights, if I'm not mistaken? Lomachenko,
I think he's 20-0 or 21-0.
Okay. Same with Lomachenko. There haven't been a lot of fights in their career, but I can understand when you've had a ton of amateur matches, you feel that's all the experience you need. You're seasoned, you fought an international competition. So sometimes let's take into account the amateur career as well. Some of these fighters who had a lot of pro fights coming up, I kind of wonder, is that where they got their schooling? Because they didn't have a lot of amateur fights, as opposed to a
Lomachenko or a Golovkin.
Right. Exactly.
But Jack, in Lomachenko's defense, he's only had about 17 or 18 fights, but 16 of them have been title fights.
Exactly.
So it's not like he's skating and not fighting good guys. He's done that in 3 weight classes.
No,
I think the money is so much better today for the elite guys. And Jack, I know we just touched on it, but I still think the Mayweather effect has an effect where I just think these guys are afraid that the fans are so conditioned that if a fighter loses, they will not be valued and they're considered not worth watching. But as long as you have that, the fans think, this is somebody special. And that's not the case. But in boxing, if you're undefeated, you're a star. Once you lose, I think the fans lose a little interest in you.
I think
the players try to protect that.
Yeah, Frank, I know that's what a lot of people think what you're saying, but I think it's a bit overrated. The case in point, Top Rank is promoting Robsy Ramirez, the guy who beat Shakur Stevenson in the Olympic final to win the gold medal. And him and Shakur, you thought it would be a natural pairing as pros. Shakur gets his revenge. Ramirez is this, great Cuban fighter, but he lost. Ramirez got upset on the Top Rank show in his first fight. That was mind-boggling. But guess what? They're promoting him. He's in good form now, and he's going to be fighting for one of the titles this year. Probably is going to win it. They might match him with Isaac Dogbo, junior lightweight division, fights like that. And, it depends. Lomachenko, getting back to him, His second pro fight was for title against Orlando Salido, and he lost. Do you think anyone cares that Lomachenko has a loss on his record?
No, not when he jumped in that deep early. No, and that fight was very, very competitive.
Frank, and when we hear about make-believe fights, the king of make-believe fights, I think at least, this is a good question, the king of make-believe fights is probably Mike Tyson. You keep hearing how Tyson's going to do against all these guys, and the Tyson followers don't care about reality that he lost a number of times as a pro. They're still going to, argue, well, who would have won between Tyson and Ali? They don't care that Tyson lost the Holyfield. They just think of a peak Iron Mike.
Jack, think about this. I don't think there's ever been a fighter in boxing history like Mike Tyson when it comes to evaluating him and matching him up against other greats. If you think about it, Tyson's window of greatness was November of '86 against Trevor Berbick through the Tyson fans like to think June of '88 when he beat Spinks, but he didn't lose the title until '90. But it's like I've never seen a fighter where he had a 20-year career, but we're only allowed to judge him on about 3 years of that. There's no other fighter in boxing history that applies to.
Yeah, but sometimes we notice certain trends with fighters when we have a body of evidence. In the case of a Mike Tyson, there's a body of evidence that he doesn't do so well against tall guys, not nearly as well as shorter guys. And you look at Tony Tucker, gave him problems. Razor Ruddock gave him problems. Buster Douglas gave him problems. He even had to hit Jose Ribalta for 10 rounds before he could get him out. And Mitch Blood Green goes the distance. Tall guys give him problems. Notice that. The shorter guys, he's able to reach a lot easier, which kind of makes you think if he fought one of the, even a Tyson Fury to reach up at him, I don't know how that would go. I don't want to evaluate that fight. Or any of the tall guys, Lennox Lewis.
But Jack, being a 5'10" heavyweight, most of the guys he's going to fight are taller than him. How many great heavyweights have there been under 6 feet? Frazier, Dempsey, Marciano, Tyson.
Okay, but if you even think about a dream fight, if I said the two hardest punches in the history of heavyweight division are arguably, I'm only saying, Tyson and Deontay Wilder. They're amongst the short list that we could all agree on. If they fought one another, Tyson's the better fighter, the two, technically better. You would think should win because the power would cancel out one another. But I might pick a Wilder in a fight like that because he's tall. He's going to back off. Tyson's not going to get him out of there so easily. And Wilder's going to be able to reach him while Tyson's taking, some rounds.
Wow, that's funny, Jack. I couldn't disagree more. I think Mike Tyson.
I'm not saying that would be my pick. I'm saying it's something I seriously have to think about in Wilder's defense.
See, I think Tyson is so elusive. He would get inside. That smothers Wilder's power, and Tyson can put both hands together. He is hard to hit, and he does have a good chin. And I just don't think if he's inside and he has Wilder on the ropes, that Wilder could get anything on his shots. If he caught him coming in, it would be a different story. But that's a fight that a lot of guys today talk about. I think that Tyson definitely wins that fight. It's a bad matchup, I believe. All right, Jack, there were a couple fights this week and nothing big. Jaime Munguia fought and won. He fought a no-hope guy. I actually forget the opponent's name.
Munguia wins in the third round, Frank. Then the big, brave Munguia is calling out Gennady Golovkin. Imagine that. Everyone is now calling out Gennady Golovkin because Gennady Golovkin is way past his prime and he still has name value. So the risk isn't nearly as great. Take my word. If this was Golovkin in his prime, Munguia wouldn't want to even, be at the same arena that if he saw Golovkin fighting, he'd be watching on TV. But now that, Golovkin has slipped, all these guys are calling him up. They're lining him up to fight Golovkin, but they're not lining up to fight one another.
No. And Munguia also called out Charlo, but I don't think I think he went back to Golovkin. It's for all the reason you said. We see Golovkin is on the decline. He can't fight a full 3-minute round anymore. He's easier to hit. His jab's not as effective as it was. Although I think I would still take Golovkin to beat Munguia. How about you?
I couldn't pick Golovkin to beat any world-class guy. Now, Munguia, how world-class he is, I'm not sure.
That's the question.
He's pretty good, but he needs someone to bring out the best in him to see if it's there, whether he's elite or not. And he's with Golden Boy. And really, Golovkin, basically, he might be a free agent now. Either that, he's with Eddie Hearn. He's probably free to fight who he wants, but it's not an appealing fight, Golovkin. Golovkin Munguia, I shouldn't say that. It might be an appealing fight because you got to give Golovkin a shot in a fight like that because we don't know how good Munguia is. He struggled with, certain guys. Not an easy fight to pick, but I'd have to think the aging fighter, usually doesn't win a fight like that.
I just think there's a question on how world-class Munguia is. I can see your point, but I would go with Golovkin in this one. I would not pick Golovkin to beat Charlo, and I would pick Charlo to beat Munguia. There was also another quasi-interesting fight, Jack. Anthony Yarde scored a third? I forget what, third or second round knockout.
Yeah, he fights Artur Beterbiev next at the end of January.
January 28th.
And it's going to be in England, so he's going to have home country advantage. Yarde's going to talk a big game. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. But listen, this is the same Yarde who got stopped by Sergey Kovalev. Past his peak Kovalev.
Yeah, it's hard to... Jack, I think Yarde's pretty good, though. I think Yarde has ability. I think he's a good athlete. He's got a little pop. He can box. He depending on the opponent, he fights as the alpha. I don't think that applies when he gets in there with Beterbiev. I think he'll be on his moving in retreat, trying to box. Beterbiev is a hard guy to box. Obviously, you can't pick Yarde, but at least it's a fight, and Beterbiev is trying to stay active. We all want to see the Bivol fight. I don't know if we're going to see that or not, but as far as the action goes, that's pretty much all there was this weekend. And what we have coming up this coming weekend is, what's the main fight? Prograis against Zepeda for the junior welterweight clash, right?
I've always liked Prograis, really good fighter. His one loss was a very close fight, great fight against Josh Taylor.
And some people thought that Prograis won.
Right. Him and Zepeda, I'll go with Prograis in the fight, but it's, I wouldn't count Zepeda out.
I will not count Zepeda out, but at one time, actually until the Taylor fight, I thought Prograis was the best junior welterweight in the world. And Jack, I think that day could still be out there. I love his strength. I love his aggression. He's southpaw. He can box. He fights with a mindset of a bully. And he's been on the shelf for a while as far as big name goes. And I think he's going to have a big night, and he'll probably stop Zepeda. And I believe that is what? That's on the zone, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not certain. Don't hold me to it.
I meant to check that before we came on, and I forgot. But I think that's on the zone. I look for Prograis to have a big night. And Jack, at 140, Teofimo Lopez is there. He's fighting pretty soon. I would love to see a Lopez fight with Prograis.
Pedraza, and Pedraza had to pull out of the fight due to medical issues. So Sander Martin, the guy who beat Mikey Garcia upset by decision, is coming in. And unless Lopez really went backwards by a lot. He's had one fight, Lopez, since, he got upset by George.
Like Kambosos.
a year ago. It's the type of fight you figure Lopez should win. To lose to Sandor Martin, it's possible, but I noticed the way they're matching Lopez. He's now a junior welterweight. He moved up from the lightweight division. It should have happened a while ago. He had trouble making weight. He's big. He really should be fighting at welterweight. But
he's kind of short for that.
Yeah. And what fight could they make for him? The fight that they actually could make, if Josh Taylor beats Jack Catterall in a rematch, Josh Taylor is promoted by Top Rank. Teofimo Lopez is promoted by Top Rank. They can make that fight,
and that would be a nice fight,
right? And that whether they make that fight in Ireland in a big stadium somewhere else, but both of them have big personalities. Teofimo Lopez and also.
And if you throw Prograis in that mix, and you have Ramirez there. Again, there's a lot going on in that division, and we know sooner or later Haney's going to be at 140. Ryan Garcia is going to be at 140.
Great point that you mentioned. Haney's fight, but Haney's going to fight Lomachenko in the spring. It's going to happen because they're both promoted by Top Rank.
But win or lose, I think he goes to 140 afterwards.
Haney, I think he goes wherever he can get a big fight. I haven't heard about Haney having trouble making the weight.
He's talked about going up to 140, Jack.
I mean, I could argue, then again, every fighter has trouble making the weight. No one likes to make weight. No one's really fighting in the natural weight class outside of maybe heavyweights. I could argue that case. But Haney's going to go with a big fight. So, yeah, believe me, Bob Arum said the winner of Lomachenko and Haney, which is going to be Haney, by the way. He wants to
agree.
Stevenson. Why would Haney want to risk a fight with Shakur Stevenson? I'm not saying he couldn't win. I don't know who I'd pick. But let's face it, they're a mirror image of one another. It's a very risky fight, okay, for Haney. And if he can move up a division and fight Teofimo Lopez, if Lopez beats Josh Taylor, that would be a big fight in Vegas or whatever.
But Jack, they're all risky too. I don't think the track is any slower at 140. I could see Haney being in just as much trouble at 140 as he would be with Shakur.
Against who, Frank?
Against Lopez. Against Prograis?
Isn't the threat that Shakur Stevenson would be? No,
I'm not saying I could see him losing though, because I think at the higher weight, physicality will be more of an issue. And I could see Haney getting beat by those guys. I don't think that he's in over his head more Shakur than he is against Lopez or Prograis or Ramirez or Taylor.
Shakur Stevenson against Haney's a chess match. Haney wins a round. Stevenson wins a round. They keep alternating. I mean, Shakur Stevenson would be a very, very difficult guy for Haney to win rounds against. He doesn't have to worry about Shakur's power like he would Lopez's power, but those guys recognize one another. Both Shakur.
I think Shakur has one extra gear that Haney doesn't, and that's more or less on my part, the eye test and a feeling I get. Haney has impressed me, and I mean, he can do everything, but I just think of the two of them, Shakur might be a tad more special.
Since we're on that division, Frank, kudos to you. I got to praise you. You totally fooled me. Okay, because I was ready to lie into you today because I thought for sure you were going to lead this show with this rumored fight that's supposed to be taking place in the spring. You get all excited because one of your idols is supposed to be in this so-called mega match, which isn't going to happen this spring. Don't listen to this nonsense on the news. But I'll bring it up. I'll be the bad guy. I cracked before you this week, Frank. I cracked before you. So I'll open it up for you. You could attack me on it for mentioning it. Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis. It's flooding the airwaves. They're not going to fight this spring, folks. Don't listen to what you're hearing, but they might eventually fight. Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence are never going to fight unless I saw someone post something when they're like 50 years old. They're going to have.
I saw that.
That was funny. That was really funny. But I don't think Tank is scared of Garcia at all. I don't think Garcia is scared of Tank. But there's a mix-up. Now, I just want everyone out there to realize anything. You hear they've agreed to the fight, to this, to that. How come we haven't heard about purse splits? Who's getting what? That means they haven't agreed to it. In principle, they decided, yeah, we want to fight one another. We want to make this happen. But business-wise, they're not even close at this point. Just because the parties say, yeah, we're going to meet on this date, okay? It's like you and your friends, Frank, who decide to meet for dinner, you and your friends. I mean, I know you like the fast food places, the Philly cheesesteaks, and one of them wants to go to a fancy steakhouse. You never wind up meeting them there after all. You kind of veer off and get a Philly cheesesteak somewhere.
With extra cheese and mushrooms.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. But listen, I mean, Tank, your guy.
Wait a second. Stop saying Tank is my guy because I acknowledge how skilled he is. He's my guy. I'm acknowledging his skill set. The guy can box, he can punch, he can go inside, outside, he can fight tall, short, it doesn't matter. He's not my guy. I think he's very skilled.
He is very skilled.
And I would pick, and Jack, if the fight does become a reality, I would pick him to beat Ryan Garcia.
Do you say that with absolute confidence?
No, because Garcia is bigger than him. He's taller, he can punch, and he's tough. No, I don't think it's a gimme, but I think Tank is more versatile. I think he's been in with better people. I think he's been tested more, and I think he's a smarter fighter of the two. But no, I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it.
It's not going to happen in the spring, but they might fight one another. You know, it might get delayed till next winter, next fall. You know, but it's not happening this spring because there are too many things, you know, that still have to be settled there. But I feel the same way you do, but I would pick Garcia if it took place. But I can't say that with absolute confidence. I just can't.
But you would take Garcia?
I would take Garcia. I just feel he boxes a little better from the outside. I think Tank is relying more and more on his power as he gets older. And I don't think I was at the Raleigh Romero fight. I don't think he looked good, Frank. I don't want to say he regressed, you know, in that one performance. But, you know, Raleigh Romero is a pretty good fighter, not world class. He's not one of the elite lightweights. He's a level below. And Tank was struggling with him until he landed the big punch. So the power's still there. And the way Garcia fights from the outside, is Tank going to win rounds against him, or is he relying on his power? I
think he will set him up for the big shots down the stretch. And the fact that if Luke Campbell can drop and hurt Garcia, Campbell can't punch like Tank, can't put him together. He's not as good. So I would take my chances with Tank winning that fight. But again, according to you, it's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen this spring, okay? It's going to get delayed. Eventually, both guys need a big fight. And I'm going to tell you something about Ryan Garcia. He's definitely afraid of Devin Haney because Haney schooled him in the amateurs several times. And when you fight a guy a few times in the amateurs and you consider yourself one of the elite amateurs in the world and you can never beat this guy, it's inside your head. I mean,
Jack, you do know that Buster Mathis beat Frazier twice, got killed by him as a pro, and Henry Tillman beat Mike Tyson twice in the amateurs to go to the Olympics, and Tyson tore him apart.
It was a whole different thing. It was a whole different mindset. Customato had a sneaky plan. He wanted Tyson as the alternate to spar with Henry Tillman and knock Tillman out, because if he knocked him out in the gym, Tillman wouldn't be allowed to go to the Olympics, and Tyson, the alternate, would take his place. Tillman got wind of it, and they never, had.
But Tillman beat him both times clean in the amateurs to go in the box offs to go to the Olympics.
But those wins by Mathis over Frazier, Tillman over Tyson, that was done under a short period of time. Haney owed Garcia over a longer period of time. There's a difference involved. If one guy has your number for 2 years, you fight him now and then, and he's beating you over a 2-year period. It's different than over a period of a few weeks that he beats.
Jack, I think that goes away once they become pros and they become men and fill out and develop. I'm not sure Garcia fears them.
Haney's laughed at Garcia. He's said numerous times, "Why don't we fight?" And Garcia's never pushed for it. That
surprises me, because on the internet and on Twitter and on Facebook, anybody can challenge anybody and they never have to back it up. So I'm surprised. But Jack, as far as Davis and Garcia, they both need each other in a way. They need each other because their success doesn't match their celebrity status. And they both need the big win in that department. And I hope you're wrong. I'm not sure if you are not. I wouldn't get my hopes up, but it's something that had to be addressed. But I was gonna wait for a lull, because again, I'm not confident it's gonna happen. I did a post on it, and I made sure I qualified if it happens. And I'll end it with this: if it happens, I like Tank.
Well, when I'll think it's going to happen, when I hear what they're getting paid, what the purse splits are, because that's public knowledge normally, and we haven't heard any of that.
So it should be a 50-50 split.
Tank's the more accomplished of the two.
He is, and he's the bigger draw, and he's won titles.
Yeah, I could see if I'm Tank, I hold out for more money. If Garcia insisted on a 50-50 split, if I would Tank, I might not take the fight. I'd say 60-40 is reasonable. If I'm Garcia, if I want to fight that badly, yeah, I'll take the short end of 60-40, try to beat Tank, and now I'm a big star.
Well, we'll see. I hope it happens. I'm with you. I'm not convinced that it will, but maybe they just took advantage of the lull of what's going on. Not a lot of big fights, and they're both social media stars, and they wanted to capitalize on it. So who knows? All right, Jack, that pretty much is it. Before we get to our fantasy fights, today is the 50th anniversary of Muhammad Ali fighting defending light heavyweight champ Bob Foster. Ali fought 6 times in 1972. He was very busy that year. I believe he shared the Fighter of the Year with Carlos Monzon that year, recognized by Ring Magazine. The significance of the Foster fight was 2 things that stand out to me. Number one, that Ali fought 6 times that year on the comeback trail, trying to get the rematch with Frazier. And the other thing is, Foster cut Ali with a jab, and it was the only time Ali was ever cut as a pro.
Yeah, I mean, that fight in November 1972, I think was like what was it, 5 months after Foster scored one of the most devastating knockouts in boxing history when he knocked out Mike Quarry.
Yeah, that was in June, and he fought on the same card as Ali and Jerry.
Right, and Mike Quarry had an outstanding chin. That was the thing about it. Yeah,
he was 37-0.
Yeah, but the thing about it was, Ali had gotten to the point after the first Frazier fight. Right after that, he became a fat cat a lot of the time. He only trained very hard now and then if the opponent posed a serious threat. And clearly he wasn't in top shape for Bob Foster. Not at all. But that's Ali's doing.
No, he was 221.
Right. And Ali was the bigger guy. Foster should have been put on the house arrest in boxing. He shouldn't have been allowed to fight outside of the light heavyweight division. Because when he wanted into heavyweight territory, he was atrocious.
Isn't that something? And they weren't real big heavyweights. He lost to Doug Jones. Zora Foley, Terrell,
yeah,
Frazier, and Ali.
But the way he lost to Frazier, got devastated. But even in the first, and Foster's power, because 175 didn't translate into the same power as a heavyweight. He hit Frazier one really good shot in the first round. And Floyd Patterson asked Frazier later, it looked like he really stunned you with that punch. And Frazier said, yeah, that's about as hard as I've been hit. But all it did was stun Frazier for a moment.
Yeah, if that.
And then Frazier, devastated Foster. And against Ali had a certain arrogance. He would just move in on Foster, kind of the way Tyson Fury moved in on Deontay Wilder.
Yep, pick him apart, move out.
And he took some shots, but Ali felt a couple of them because he did the wobbly leg thing,
Yep, like he was hurt.
But Foster was never any type of threat to beat Ali. But we didn't know it at the time because Foster was so devastating as a light heavyweight. You kind of wondered, could he maybe lay one on Ali's chin? But you knew it was a long shot. And Ali's mere body weight tired Foster out.
And Ali knocked him down, I think, 7 times in 8 rounds. I mean, today that fight would have been stopped in the 4th round.
In certain light heavyweights, they could move up to heavyweight, and they would have a decent chin still. They could take a heavyweight's power, certain light heavyweights, but Foster couldn't at all. So when you're rating Bob Foster, you have, as opposed to other great light heavyweights, it's so hard to compare him to Michael Spinks because Michael Spinks left the light heavyweight division and had great success. So you could rate him ahead of Foster just based on that alone.
Think about this. What would Larry Holmes, even though he was 35, what would Larry Holmes have done to Bob Foster? It would have been the same thing that Ali did. And what would Jerry Cooney have done to Bob Foster?
Oh, he would have. Jerry Cooney knocks him out.
And we know what Tyson would have done. That would have been Frazier, only probably in the 1st round.
Yeah. I mean, Bob Foster just couldn't, he may have cut, Foster may have cut Cooney. Not for we know. The Cooney who fought Spinks wasn't really that good a fighter.
He wasn't vintage Cooney, but he still would beat Bob Foster.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, absolutely.
The only other thing, Jack, I can say about that fight is I remember Tom Harmon interviewing Foster in the ring, and Foster was in tears, and he's there. I just can't believe it. A heavyweight just shouldn't be that fast. I can't believe how fast Ali is. I never saw that coming.
Ali really wasn't that quick. And not
at 221, but he was still quicker than Foster, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I don't think Ali beat him on speed. Ali basically just imposed his will on him, his strength, and he tired Foster.
He got some quick overhand rights in on Foster and snuck him with some uppercuts. I think his speed, I disagree to a degree. I think his speed had a little bit to do with it.
I guess. Okay. I'll give you that. Yeah.
All right, Jack. Well, here's some things you can't be wrong on. This is your favorite part of the show. And this is where we go through hypothetical fights, taking the guys. The rules are basically 15 rounds, both guys at their best. These are not my picks. Our viewers and followers have submitted these to me. I posted most of them today. So let's start with the first one, which I think was very intriguing. Gene Tunney versus Joe Louis.
I mean, when you say intriguing, how intriguing? Do you really think Tunney could have kept away from Louis for 15 rounds, outboxed him, and Louis not be able to figure out Tunney?
Time out. Wait, 1 second. Billy Conn did it for 13 rounds, and I think Tunney's better than Conn.
Every great champion, I can point out a fight that they were subpar, a bad moment they had. Every single one of them, I could point out, wow, Ali nearly got knocked out by Henry Cooper if the bell hadn't rung, and they're harder punches than Henry Cooper.
But that was before Ali was at his peak and filled out.
Yeah, but that's what people used in part to make Sonny Liston such a heavy favorite. 7.
Well, because it was his next fight. Yes, absolutely.
Sonny had done it Yeah, Lewis would have Lewis would have figured out. Keep one thing in mind about Lewis, though, when you say that, well, Billy Conn did this. Look at Lewis's history in rematches. He was always much
Oh, he
better
mutilated Conn.
right in the rematch. Okay. So let's figure he knows all about Tunney. Lewis would have been up for the fight. He would have been in great shape. Tunney would have maybe been outboxing him for a while, but I'd see Lewis getting to Tunney in the 10th, 11th round. The term, he could run, but he can't hide.
That's pretty much how I see it, Jack. I think Tunney's lateral movement enables him to stay with Lewis for a while, because as great as Lewis was not a guy that was going to chase you or come out of his style for you to become reckless. I think that Tunney has some good rounds early. I think eventually Lewis catches him probably with an overhand right while Tunney's coming in, and I think he freezes him and he goes in and either finishes him or does enough damage in the next round. Tunney isn't what he was. I think Lewis would track him down, and I think he would definitely stop him. I don't think Tunney could live with Lewis for 15 rounds, but I do think his style, his chin, and his stamina, I do think he'd be in the fight for a little while, because it's not like Lewis is an attacker and he's going to come out and get him. Lewis is a boxer puncher, so he's going to box for a while before he starts unloading the heavy artillery. What were you going to say?
The closest to Gene Tunney, perhaps, that Lewis fought, perhaps, would maybe be Bob Pastor, who was a mover, and they fought twice. First fight, Lewis won by decision. It would be hard to outpoint Tunney, even though this is not to say Lewis wouldn't. And then when they fought late on with the title in the line, I think Lewis stopped him in 11 rounds, knocked him down a few times. I'm going from memory, the two fights now. If I'm wrong on that, let someone correct me, but I don't think I am. But
well, both fights were title fights.
No, the first one wasn't. It was before Lewis was champion. It was
okay. What am I thinking? Who did he fight? He had a couple guys he fought twice for the title, and
Abe Simon, but Abe was a big husky.
And Arturo Godoy, that's right.
Arturo Godoy, right. I mean, listen, I watched the first Godoy-Lewis fight in its entirety, and that was a split decision, but Lewis won 10 of the 15 rounds. Lewis didn't look great, but he was like a clear winner, but not an overwhelming winner. Won 10 of the 15 rounds. And then in the rematch, he stopped Godoy. He was, like I said, he's always better the second time around. But we caught the same way. Tunney would be in the fight, maybe win some rounds, maybe get off to a nice lead, maybe win 3 of the first 4 rounds.
I could see that.
When Lewis starts.
After 5 rounds, it's probably even.
Yeah.
So we agree. We both like Lewis to beat Tunney, right?
Yeah.
And since we're talking about Arturo Godoy, the next one is Arturo Godoy versus Oscar Bonavena. Now, think about that. What are they both known for? Fighting a great fighter named Joe and giving them a tough time the first time and then losing convincingly in the rematch. But when you think of Godoy, he's best known for going the distance with Lewis and then getting stopped by him. He was a guy that fought out of a crouch. He was tough. He was awkward. Those are the type guys that give Lewis trouble. I'll go first on this one. I don't think there's much boxing involved. I just think that Bonavena, from what I've seen on film, was a little bit stronger, just a little bit better and more unpredictable. Neither guy's going to knock the other guy out. I think Bonavena wins a very, very ugly decision and beats Godoy.
Yeah, but Godoy had success against Lewis by crouching low all fight long.
That's not going to work with Bonavena, Jack, because he's going to be in a phone booth.
Bonavena was a roughhouse guy. When you think of Bonavena, I mean, you think of a guy who was a perennial contender. But I kind of wonder, was he a little bit of a gatekeeper? Should we have considered him as such? He knocked Frazier down 2 times when they're on the way up, and Frazier wins. I think it was a split decision, if I'm not mistaken. Right. But then his later fights, he competed very well at the highest level. but he lost to Joe 15 rounds, the rematch in Philly at the Spectrum.
I was at that fight. I was 10 years old.
Right, but the idea that he could withstand that ferocious attack by Frazier, kudos to him, gave Ali pure hell for 15 rounds until he got nailed.
And the reason, and think about the reason why. And Ali talked about this often. He thought that fighting Bonavina would be good prep for Frazier because they're both aggressive. They both carry the fight. Bonavina made Ali go to him. Bonavina backed up a lot and didn't put the heat on Ali where Ali had to go to him. And that's not Ali at his best. And Ali said after the fight, he goes, I thought this guy was going to come after me and try to take my head off. He made me chase him down. But his awkwardness bothered Ali. And the thing that's crazy, think about this. Ellis and Ali both had Bonavina down. Ellis dropped him twice in the tournament. Ali dropped him 3 times and stopped him. Yet in 25 rounds, Frazier never had Bonavina close to going down. He really, Bonavina just, he was confident against Frazier, almost like Norton was with Ali. He was confident fighting Frazier. He kind of offset Joe's aggressiveness with his awkwardness. And it's just crazy because if you think about who's a harder puncher, Frazier hit harder than both Ali and Ellis, but yet they both had Bonavina hurt much more than Joe ever did.
I could tell you a forgotten fight that I was at the Garden.
Patterson and Bonavina.
Patterson and Bonavina. And I scored, it was a 10-rounder. I scored it 5 rounds to 4, 1 even in Patterson's favor. Patterson rallied the last 2 rounds of the fight. But that should explain to Bonavina, if he was elite, you maybe beat Patterson at that point in his career, maybe, But Bonavina, I mean, he was in the best, and you couldn't psych the guy, it would seem, at least on the surface. But yeah,
no, he was a crude, rough, tough guy. So who would you go with, Bonavina or Godoy?
I'd go with Bonavina. I don't think the cuteness of Godoy, crouching, so on. I would go with Bonavina in that fight. It's very sloppy, ugly fight.
It's funny, Jack, and you mentioned Patterson and the Patterson-Bonavina fight. And I was having this discussion a month or so with somebody. And if you look at Patterson's career, he actually had his best wins after he lost the title to Liston. He had some of his he had some once Customato wasn't around and stopped protecting him. Patterson beat better guys after he fought Liston than he did before Liston.
Well, let's see.
Think about that.
Well,
think about that.
He beat Machin. He beat Bonavina. He beat Henry Cooper. He knocked out. Yeah, there was some good. Yeah, that was some good.
The fights with Ellis were disputable, or the fight was disputable. The 2 fights with Quarry were disputable. He beat Chuvalo after he lost to Liston.
Yeah.
You could make a case, and again, he beat Bonavina. He had his career was better after he lost the title to Liston than as far as beating better people than it was while he was champion.
Well, let me tell you something with Patterson. We mentioned in the past about promotional groups that if a fighter really wants to make a fight bad enough, he can overrule everybody and absolutely insist. And they'll come around and make the fight. Maybe they'll have no business to do with them after. But Patterson's relationship with Customato broke up because Patterson insisted he fight Liston. He insisted.
Right.
Okay? Because he felt Liston was the most worthy contender. He doesn't want to duck any contender at all. Kudos to Patterson. It backfired, of course, but Patterson took the chance. And all these champions today who are deferring to their promoters, the TV networks, they could make it happen if they absolutely wanted to.
I'm just glad there's one great fighter named Floyd that took risk.
Yeah.
And tried to fight the best.
And did.
All right, Jack. And it's funny how this is just one thing leads to another, because the next hypothetical fight does involve Floyd Patterson. And that is Floyd Patterson against Jimmy Young. You go first.
Now I'm going to surprise you.
No, you're not.
Floyd Patterson upsets Jimmy Young. He outpoints him because I think all of Young's cuteness and all those moves, they're less effective against Patterson. Consider this. All Young's moves were against a plodding George Foreman, not a fast-handed George Foreman. A George Foreman who tried to win by force, who would move straight in him. Same thing with Muhammad Ali. That was an overweight, out-of-shape Ali who just tried to move in on Young and beat him by force. He took him lightly. And Patterson had faster hands than a Ken Norton. Very fast hands. He'd be the faster fighter against Young. And all of Young's cuteness with the jab here and there, Patterson attacks enough to win a decision against a vintage Jimmy Young. Okay,
I shouldn't have let.
But maybe a fairly close fight. But I think Patterson's versatility, the faster hands, his ability to move in and out. Young is going to have a hard time hitting Patterson because Patterson's rhythm is going to be much harder to adjust to than Foreman's. And
I shouldn't have let you go first because that's exactly how I see it.
Wow.
I think that Jimmy Young is troubled by smaller, quick guys like he was by Ozzie Ocasio. Patterson is better than him. I think Patterson's hand speed, his in and out aggression, the fact that Jimmy Young's not going to hurt him, knock him down, or knock him out. I think Jimmy Young would be, and I love Jimmy Young, but I think I think there's a lot of guys that Jimmy Young beat who Patterson would never beat. But in their head-to-head matchup, I think Jimmy Young would lose to Patterson by a decision. And Jack, I don't even think it would be controversial. I think Patterson's work rate, the way he get off, I think he would just out-hustle Jimmy over the course of the fight and would win. He'd never hurt Young, but I think his aggression, in and out, up and down, putting the punches together, I don't think Jimmy would know what to do with that. So I think Patterson would beat Jimmy Young by decision. Okay, we agree so far. 3 for 3. That's how much time? We got 8 minutes. All right, let's try to get to 3 quick ones. Gene Fullmer versus Marvin Hagler.
Marvin Hagler in that fight. I respect Gene Fullmer enormously. Rough, tough, great fighter. Hagler a little too versatile. Hagler was just as physically tough as Fullmer. Let's get that straight. Hagler had a great chin. Hagler was the harder puncher. His work rate, everything involved. Hagler run points.
All right, Jack. I'd like to disagree. They both have a good chin. Fullmer would carry the fight to Hagler. That plays to Hagler's advantage. I don't know if Hagler was the harder puncher. I think he's the sharper puncher. I think he'd land the cleaner shots, and I think that would be the distance. I think the fight goes the distance, and I think that Hagler would win.
You agree with me then?
I agree with you. I just see it a little differently, but I agree with you. Okay? Yeah. So I must rethink my position since we agree. All right, the next one. Bob Foster versus Dwight Muhammad Qawi.
My problem, Frank, I'm thinking of Qawi, the Qawi who fought Holyfield. If that same Qawi shows up at light heavyweight, he upsets Foster, okay? But I'm not, sure. I mean, I'm evaluating him in another division as well.
Well, think about Qawi that's best. The one that beat Saad twice, the one that fought Spinks, the one that beat the Davis brothers, the one that knocked out Rossman and Jerry Martin against Foster.
So I was thinking that Qawi would win, but I remember how devastating Foster was at his best. Everyone was scared of him. I mean,
Qawi would not have been scared of him, Jack. No way.
If he was around when Foster was.
No way.
Okay, maybe no way, but Foster was the Mike Tyson of the light heavyweight division. Sonny Liston, as far as fighters having fear of him. They didn't want to know from him. And by the way, Frank, I saw when you post saying about Foster's opponents, Dick Tiger beats Yaki Lopez, but that's another issue, to talk about.
Right, I don't agree with that. Not 37-year-old Dick Tiger.
But you want to know something? Can Foster go to 15 rounds if he doesn't stop Qawi My feeling is I hate to say it, I'm going to go with Kari to upset Foster. Foster would be favored in such a matchup.
I think he'd be favored.
I'd go with Kari to upset him because I think Kari would be able to maybe come on in the later rounds of the fight. Foster boxed very well, but if he didn't get Kari out of there, and there's a reasonable chance he wouldn't because Kari had an excellent chin.
And he was elusive.
Foster would be up maybe 5-3 or something, and then kind of would tire a bit, and Kari would come on in the later rounds, and I think would either stop Foster late or, outpoint him.
Okay, this is how I see it. When I think of Kari against Saad, against James Scott, against Michael Spinks, and the first fight with Holyfield, and I just think about that. He had Holyfield in front of him for 15 rounds teeing off. He never really took a backward step. He was never hurt.
Cruiserweight.
True. But even Michael Spinks never dented him, never really deterred him. He outboxed him. So to me, 15 rounds with Spinks, 15 rounds with Holyfield. I think Kari is hard to hit. I think he could make Foster miss, make him punch down. He didn't like to do it. Foster has a good chin, not a great chin, but Kari has an outstanding chin.
Foster's chin was a little bit of a question mark. Kari's wasn't. We know how.
But Foster's never stopped at light heavyweight, so I'm going to give him that. But I just think that Kari's toughness, his aggression, his pace, his size. I also think inside he could actually jab with Foster. Dwight had a good jab, great body puncher, and I just think Jack he wouldn't
have been able to jab with Foster on a constant basis.
Jack, inside he would, not outside, but when he was inside, from mid-range on, I think he would be able to.
The risk for Kari, he would have been walking a tightrope for every second the fight was going on, every moment. Even when it looked like Kari would be taking over the fight and Foster was faltering, Foster was known to come up with one big punch out of nowhere, and the majority.
But it would have to be his left hook, right?
In all probability,
I didn't see Foster ice many guys with his right hand. It had to be his left hook.
He fought a fighter from Houston who was unbeaten. I don't know whether you're familiar with him, Mark Tesman.
I know the name.
Tesman ran the whole fight. And Foster finally, started getting tired in the late rounds. And then Tesman started to come on, taking it to Foster. And then Foster, when it looked like it was faltering, landed one shot and knocked Tesman out. That was the danger he presented. There's this fighter, Ray Anderson, who you should be familiar with, was handled by Yank Durham.
And he was Joe's sparring partner. He went 15 rounds with Foster, but he ran.
He ran. I never saw
that. Was the worst fight I ever saw.
And afterwards, Ray Anderson apologized to Yank Durham for that because Yank Durham said, I'm disgraced to be with a fighter that would run like that. But Anderson had the greatest legs you ever saw, the way he ran 15 rounds.
Yeah, Foster couldn't get near, but we know Kari can't fight like that. Kari's going to have to bring it. And, Jack, I just think his strength, his chin, and Kari, a lot of people don't give him credit. Dwight was a very, very smart boxer, and he did use his jab. He had a conventional right hand, and Jack, he was a very determined, tough, mean individual who did not believe he could be beat, and he fought with that attitude. Remember, I know he was in Rahway. He had no problem going back into Rahway to fight Scott when nobody wanted to fight Scott and when he was beating everybody. And I just think he was in with better people. And I think for that run between 81 and 83, 84, I just think that he would beat Bob Foster. I know that's a mortal sin to think that, but I do think he would beat him. And the other one I wanted to get to, and we'll get to it next week.
I think we're going to have to hold off till next week.
Right. Next week, we'll start with Arguello versus Esteban de Jesus. I'm assuming that's a lightweight. That's a very intriguing fight. Before we go, we both like Prograis to win this week, this coming Saturday. And then the following week, we'll talk about Estrada and Chocolatito have their third fight.
Absolutely. It was a lot of
All
fun.
right.
So,
Thanks, Jack, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for watching.